Thanks, and welcome to this evening from Cork Environmental Forum on Sustainable Economics.
You might wonder why we put such an emphasis on economic growth, for instance, when it trashes the planet and doesn't make us any happier. Well, that's partially our evolutionary bequest of our evolutionary heritage. This is what we do on the planet. That red thing in the middle is our economy. It takes in energy, it takes in materials, it transforms them into goods and services, and it throws out the waste. That could be greenhouse gases, it could be what's in our dumps, it could be nitrous oxides. It doesn't matter, but that's the story of what our economy is doing. And what that red thing is doing is increasing every year. So for example, if growth is 3%, which is not considered very much, certainly not in Ireland of the last few years, that's 3% that's added on to the year before. So every 3% every year later is a bigger bite of the chunk. Globally, that means that every year we're taking a bigger and bigger bite of the Earth's resources. What that has led to is climate change, peak oil and gas, soil and nutrient loss, water biodiversity. There's actually a huge list. And what we know from various reports is that despite the talk, besides all the treaties, all of these indicators effectively have gotten worse. And yet we retain a remarkable optimism, almost a pathological optimism, that the next treaty, the next act, will finally put us on the road to rights. And our monetary system, strangely enough, our money is, except for the physical cash, is created as debt. So for every euro in your account, somebody else has borrowed it. If all the people with debt filled back and paid off all their accounts, all the money they owed, there'd be no money in the economy, except notes and coins. But that's it. But we need money to supply to increase every year to pay off the interest on those debts, but also people keep paying back part of their mortgage, part of other debts. So we've got to expand to cover that as well. So we're in a catch-22. We must grow the economy to stop it collapsing, but growing the economy undermines the resource base needed to keep growing the economy. We're in a bit of a bind. If you were to put $100 on a ton of carbon dioxide emitted, that would add about $45 to a barrel of oil. So you could say we've had a carbon tax of $100 more over the last year. Now, has it had much effect on demand? So far, and it's still feeding through, not too much. Has it an effect on the population? Well, there's a picture of fuel protests in Spain, they've been in Britain, and in many other parts of the world. It's also affected food prices, where you've had riots and things as well. And why are we surprised? Because energy is the driving force of the economy and economic growth. So you're going to drive people out of work. Effectively, that's what you might be designing a carbon tax to do. But that is not what governments are talking about, because the last thing they want to do is drive work out of the economy for the reasons we've seen above. So yes, we may get a carbon tax, but it might be, as CORE, our National Sustainable Development Plan, people argued, of €5 per tonne, rising by €5 per tonne every year. It will mean diddly squat, but it will keep people relatively happy. And that is really the central problem. We have to grow for the reasons we said, and yet in some ways when people talk about sustainable growth, we're being sold a little bit of a lame horse because it won't do the job it's meant to do. This has been thought about before. Herman Daly, who's one of really the founders of ecological economics, said this, and he called it an impossibility theorem. You can't have infinite growth on a finite planet. We can't keep that promise to China, to India, where people say, in the future China will rise, and it'll be the strongest and the mightiest, and India too will rise. There aren't the resources and energy available to do this. And if we thought that that would help us in climate change, and unfortunately not, which is the real sort of kick in the face of all of this, there's plenty of all of them left, even though they'll be reducing to tip the climate into it really an appalling state that we really just can't go there. So what I'm going to say now is why this could kick off a systemic collapse. And I used to talk about this because it used to freak myself and other people out. But you know, damn it, we've been right about the oil and the food so far. So, firstly, all of these threats are interrelated. You can't pick off climate change or energy or water resources and assume that you can solve each one individually. They're systemic. That means that we're not really dealing with an environmental problem or an energy problem. We're dealing with a problem about everything, about how we live. And they're becoming more tightly coupled. That means that by pulling on one strand of all of these things, once it was easy to pull and not many effects rippled out from it. Now when we pull on something, for instance, we try to solve one problem such as reducing greenhouse gas emissions or higher energy prices, we plant biofuels, you pull that and you suddenly find it's hitting food, it's hitting causing more climate change in some cases, and really it ripples out in many ways in unpredictable ways. And it's really in this sort of thing that you start to see one thing pushing another thing and how one thing can drive down something else. And that is part of what one might mean by the beginning and the running of a collapse. And because we're effectively very close to that, what might be that point, in other words, peak oil, gas supply problems, and we're seeing effects in food prices, energy prices, you can see that this sort of risk is absolutely massive. And if you don't manage it, we'll probably drag down, in panic, our whole ecosystem with us as we try to effectively regain or hold on to what is fundamentally unsustainable. We are entering a very transformative, but let's say delicate period. If we don't hold on and find ways of holding on to commons like land and other things, they will be taken from us because the stakes are going to rise more and more. As wealth goes down, which it will, the stakes will rise. And in those cases, to be resilient as a society together, to tackle these things together, we've got to take the initiative now and not be totally unprepared, because we can also lose the initiative if we don't take it opportunely.
Yes, we've got two things. We've been streaming live tonight, and that recording will be available online. And we have a high quality recording from Mike, which will be available in due course. So keep an eye on the website, and if you have signed up for our mailing list, we'll send out news on that. Great. Good night.